In just 3 weeks, Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate Daemonhunter is coming out, and it has both one of the longest names for a 40k game and some of the most pleasing XCOM style strategy that I've ever had the joy of playing. In this video today, I want to go over some of the gameplay elements for the special event that myself and a handful of other content creators attended, giving us a hands-on with the game through 2 missions and a final boss fight. If this is your first time hearing about the game, let me give you just a little bit of background. You arrive in a star system aboard the Baleful Edict, where you lead a squad of Space Marines from the Ordo Malleus. Now, these are no normal Space Marines. These are the fabled Grey Knights, decked out with special armaments and training aimed specifically at, well, hunting demons. Big shocker there. You are tasked with finding out the source of and eradicating the Bloom. This is a virulent plague that is tearing everything apart. All signs, of course, point to Nurgle, the plague god of chaos. Throughout the campaign, you upgrade your battle brothers, swap out armaments, and jump into tactical XCOM-style strategy combat, meaning you'll be moving across a grid using action points in a turn-based style system. Now, let me be the first to say, outside of XCOM, I actually hate this style of strategy. I always find that any clone of it always is just clunky, slow, and cumbersome. And that is most certainly not the case here, nay. But we'll talk more about that later. You can jump ahead to any point in the video that interests you the most using the chapters in the timeline and the description. And if you end up enjoying the content, please don't forget to like, comment, and or subscribe. We'll be covering a ton of Chaos Gate leading up to the launch this May, so look forward to plenty of guides, lore videos, and live streams. You can also pick the game up on my Nexus Store linked in the description and pinned comment. Nexus gets Steam keys directly from the developer and gives them to you, so there's no shady third-party keys, and it's a great way to help keep the channel alive. Let's dive in on some of these game mechanics. And the best place to get started is where the game positions you after the tutorial mission aboard the Baleful Edict, with plenty of things to do. And this is essentially your major hub where you do all of your pre-mission prep, and it's a pretty in-depth portion of the game. We were only allotted a certain amount of time per mission, and I spent something like, I don't know, the first 20 or 30 minutes long just going through the Baleful Edict. And you'll have 4 different screens you can look at to access different features of the pre-mission setup. The first, the Strategium, is the one that will probably fill the majority of your time. Visiting the armory allows you to spend unlock points towards 5 different requisitions. Knight Requisition grants you access to more, well, knights of higher rank, as you would assume. And then Range Requisition will help unlock higher grade ranged weapons as mission rewards. Melee Requisition will do the same thing, only for melee weapons. These higher grades, though, they include things such as, master crafted weapons and relics. And the last 2, Armor and War Gear Requisition, will have the same effect as the weapon counterparts, with War Gear unlocking passives, grenades, servo skulls, and other ancillaries that will aid your Grey Knights. The Strategium also gives you access to the barracks, where you'll have the chance to take a look at all of your blue steel colored badass Daemonhunters, customizing near everything about them. Now, this is a part of the customization that I really love for Chaos Gate. It's not just simply dudes running around screaming "Battle Brother" and headbutting pillars, which, to be fair, is a good portion of the battle system, but rather you can truly customize each and every Grey Knight you have access to. Skin color, hair color, details on their armor, even their actual crest are all completely swappable to make a squad that fits how you would assemble them had you put them together on the tabletop. Even better, you can give them a name of your choice, but you can select from a list of surnames which the Grey Knight will say when selected, as well as the voice you'd like them to have. So this is all pretty standard fare for an RPG, but to get this level of granularity in a strategy game that is not made by a AAA company has taken my tits and blown them clear off of my body. Outside of the customization options is the class system for the game. Apothecary, Purgator, Interceptor, and Justicar are the 4 classes that I was able to access in this demo. I'm not sure if there are more, but these classes then allow for specific armaments that are catered to that class's role. Purgator utilizes various heavy ordnance or flame weaponry to act as a special weapons support platform, while the Apothecary gets access to special abilities, allowing you to heal your wounded and downed Grey Knights. Interceptors and Justicars take more upfront roles, smashing into the enemy or using huge wombo combos to steel chair slam the hell out of a demon before they can even get a chance to deal damage to you. Now, I was overly bricked up in the opening moments of the game, doing all this customization before I even played, so I might be getting a little carried away. But a lot of this is very reminiscent to a similar XCOM style game in Mechanicus, only with Space Marines, and a far cooler subject matter, personally. But let's move on. Some places within the ship allow you to talk to the various NPCs, giving you background lore on the game. If you have no idea about the setting, don't know what a Gellerfield is, or haven't the slightest clue why Nurgle isn't actually the cute name for a pug, then the game will help provide at least some context. And let's be honest, the lore for Warhammer 40,000 is far too expansive, told from various perspectives, and has evolved a ton from year to year to really get the entire breadth of it in a video game. But it's enough information to keep you on track with the narrative, which is what counts here. In the manufactorum of the ship, you can spend time augmenting portions of the ship using servitors, increasing certain aspects of it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to really dive in on this mechanic as much, but I imagine this unlocks more interactions or other mechanics and so on and so forth. The Libris Malleus is where you'll spend time across two other portions of the game: stratagems and research. For those familiar with the tabletop, the stratagems play out very similarly, actually. They're temporary buffs or means of getting an edge in a fight, like teleporting your knights, healing them, or allowing them to move faster, that you can use during the actual combat of the game. I'm not really clued in on all the ways to unlock stratagems, but again, I imagine that's tied to the manufactorum, mission rewards, what have you. One of the chief ways, though, is through research, which brings me into my next discussion. The research tree acts as a growing talent tree that grants you access to more stratagems, and also ship resources the more seeds you invest into the tree. Now, these seeds are gained from missions where you pull them from hosts infected with the bloom. It's a pretty straightforward system, and one we've all become pretty accustomed to through the many games offering a similar progression style. The last menu, though, is this star map. This allows you to move from system to system and advance time. Time plays a big aspect of this game, as you probably saw in the research tree and your manufactorum. As time progresses, you work towards your unlocks, but it also acts to further the bloom's corruption in sectors, as well as your progress points back to your Grand Master. It's a good way to keep the game, or some sense of urgency, I guess, to the game, where you can't just simply go back and it can possibly shut off facets of the game if certain corruption levels are reached until you've dealt with the bloom. Attuning the prognosticator on the ship allows you to lower those corruption levels and grant additional boons. Jumping back here to the main screen, though, we can see all the information we need for the mission at hand, such as the bloom levels, the mission rewards, objectives, and what have you. The enemy reinforcements and attributes are further enhanced by the bloom corruption, so waiting to do one mission to a later point in the game might make that mission far harder if the corresponding corruption level is higher. This manifests itself as special buffs on the enemy units in combat. There are also glorious deeds, Battle Brother, which are basically bonus objectives with a challenge tacked on. For instance, this one says to win the mission without using willpower, the resource that allows you to use your special abilities, which will then grant me 4 more requisition. What I like about this is that there's a failure penalty, so we will lose a requisition if we do not complete this bonus objective. It creates a sort of self-encompassing challenge mode to each mission that actually has ramifications. Something I enjoy more and more in video games, as you know, Elden Ring has been using my ball sack as a rhythm bag for the last month and a half. Now, once you accept the mission, you have one final chance to swap out and change your chosen Grey Knights. And it's also an epic screen to see all of them arrayed before you, their armaments on display as their power fields of their force halberds and swords crackle in the air prior to teleportation planetside. Now, unfortunately, I cannot show off the different armaments available to each class and Grey Knight, as those are not fully completed yet, but I can assure you that there are a lot of options to choose from to cater your loadout as it's seen fit for every single mission and what you're trying to accomplish. Moving into combat, we have again a very similar grid style movement and combat system that should feel familiar to fans of the genre. While the game does have a tutorial mission, one thing I really struggled with here was a lack of tooltips. So I wasn't sure exactly what each and everything was on the screen that the game didn't explain in the tutorial. So if I get anything wrong in this section, I apologize. It's mainly because I was unaware of what certain things did. Now, by all intents and purposes, the combat in the game plays out very much like every other game in the genre, but holy shit, I didn't know I wanted to see a Grey Knight teleport strike around a battlefield, or watch a Psy Cannon go off in glorious display until I played this game. The game just works in such a great and fluid way. Nothing feels clunky, and it's really only as slow as I want to play it. But let's break some of this down. Each knight has their own abilities that are dictated by the classes that we went over earlier. You then use your 3 action points to move, attack, or even attack again. Again, just very straightforward. When it comes to combat with enemies, there's a lot going on here. Remember what I said about the bloom and how the more corruption, the more abilities they get? Well, these plague bearers, for instance, have a ton of mutations on them, as well as a random effect generated by the mission as a result of the bloom. So the enemies are varied, and within their variety is a random element. This evolves further throughout the actual mission. In a lot of these shots and videos, you'll see a big number at the top. This is essentially tied to activity within the warp. You'll see the bloom rises. Using willpower and other actions will increase this until it reaches a dangerous level, resulting in a warp surge, causing buffs for your enemies, random debuffs, or issues with your soldiers. Just a lot of craziness. It's a fun randomness to levels that makes your playthrough unique, and I just love it. Now, the rest of the battlefield is easily managed by moving your Grey Knights into close combat and unleashing the Emperor's Wrath, even using Psycho abilities on your Justicars or supporting bolter fire from your Purgators, whatever you want to do. What's cool about this is that you can sort of combo things up with debuffs you give to the enemy, or chain your attacks after getting consecutive kills. If your Interceptor charges in, kills a target, and then they're granted an additional action to do another attack. It's something I love because it creates a fun momentum to the game that allows you to carry from engagement to engagement. You also get a lot of ways to enhance your attacks, like a Force Strike or Warp Surge, depending on your armament that might do more damage or increasing your critical strike, whatever it is. And going more into that, you can get an actual breakdown of how crit chance and damage is going to be calculated to give you an idea of whether or not you want to go through with an action. The game, despite my comment about tooltips, does arm you with a good deal of information to help in making decisions. The cover system also confers additional armor value to units, so even at a glance, you can see how much damage you'll be doing to a unit, which helps make judgments on the fly. You can even target specific body parts, or in certain melee situations, get the chance to attack parts of a boss's body or stun an enemy by hitting its head. There's just a ton of tools presented to you. With a rather dynamic environment, allowing you to move along the Z-axis or destroy windows, walls, doors, and other destructibles, the combat for Chaos Gate is almost hectic in a great way. I don't feel overwhelmed, but I like that there's so many options to approach fights. I can hip check a pillar down onto some Nurglings and then spin around and shoot a Plague Bearer in the face with my bolter. The game just feels so alive across the stunning visuals, great audio, and especially the voice work. I love hearing the Grey Knights talk. Even the bass and thud of each bolter round is satisfying and arousing all at the same time. But let's move on to our last section regarding the boss fight. So my demo culminated in a fight between my squad and a greater demon of Nurgle, and it was a huge selling point for me. The game was pretty cool up to this point, but the challenge of the boss fight really just drew me in. And it's all the same stuff from combat, but this time you have to deal with the layered mechanics of an actual boss battle, kind of like an RPG, which you would get from, say, an MMO or, say, Divinity Original Sin. The greater demon would summon up scores of Nurglings, which at first were no big deal, but quickly became an overwhelming presence on the battlefield. Coupled with massive damaging melee attacks, debuffs, and a bevy of other abilities, the boss battle was frustratingly fun and hard as hell. In general, the game has a comfortable difficulty curve to it. Lesser enemies are not threatening on their own, but can be in mass. Scarier enemies need to be focused down quickly, as they usually have abilities that will debuff or hinder you to the point that lesser enemies can overwhelm you. This was exactly the case here with the Greater Demon. I wasn't even able to beat him. I finally was able to get some semblance of tactics in place before my mission ended, but there's so much going on. You have the ability to target specific body parts of the demon to shut down specific abilities so they can't be used during the engagement anymore. But you also have to manage the resources of your knights, their health, willpower, and ability cooldowns. It was just a real fun synergy I had to contend with as this fucking hulking greater demon smashes his way towards me and did massive damage with its flail, sending my knights flying. There are plenty of boss fights to be had in Chaos Gate, especially with Mortarion acting as an antagonist within the story, but needless to say, this was easily my favorite part of the demo. I'll conclude this section with an epic cinematic for you guys where you can actually perform Exterminatus on a planet. I am dripping after that ditty. Exterminatus is something that you get to read about in all the books, but to see it brought to life in that detail is pretty damn fun. But with all that being said, what are my thoughts about the game? How do I feel about it? Am I going to run around my living room screaming "Battle Brother" while headbutting the TV? Probably. I think that Chaos Gate has a lot of great promise attached to it. If I'm being honest here, I'm pretty well swept up in the hype of the game. My biggest issues I found were really about getting more insight about the game's mechanics in the battle map. I'm not sure if that's just something hidden as a result of not being able to fully utilize the game's tutorial because of my limited playtime or what, but almost all the other content creators I talked to also agreed with me that the lack of tooltips explaining all of these icons all over the screen was a huge detractor and added to an unnecessary learning curve to the game. Especially because so much text is colored differently throughout the ability text. It almost looks like it's supposed to be moused over for more information, but it's just not there. At the very least, an encyclopedia to look up terms would be immensely helpful. Another concern I have is repetitiveness. Taken in these kind of 3 curated missions with a lot of variety attached to them, the game seems very diverse and fun, with a huge draw attached to the class system and customization. But what I'm worried about, though, is any missions just becoming a repetitive slog of a possible batch of ones to choose from that have slightly varied playstyles. Again, that's in no way confirmed, it's just something that I worry about with this style of game, because this genre can get bogged down real fast if the missions don't keep you engaged. Now, outside of those 2 big concerns, I'm really hyped up for Chaos Gate. It's one thing to play as a Space Marine, but to play as a Grey Knight and get a lot of individual customization attached to it is a lot of fun. Especially the class system, which lends itself so well to the lore of the different knights and their execution. I think it's just a great way to present the setting to someone that's maybe unfamiliar with it, while also making them feel like a badass that is a cut above even a normal Marine. I'm also a huge fan of the art direction. The highly stylized portrayal of the knights, coupled with a lot of gritty imagery and color palettes, helps to offset a lot of the glowing blue that would otherwise look like an oversaturated mess. I'm excited to get my hands on more of the game to see if any of my fears are founded or not, as well as to get a better sense of the customization. I was so limited in my playtime that I couldn't really sink into it, which goes to say how much there actually is. Also, again, I can't stress this enough. The combat. The combat was just so enjoyable. I know we got Battle Sector not too long ago, which is a turn-based strategy game that plays out a little more in real time, but I just never felt bogged down in this game. It all felt just so fluid and so nice. It felt, like I said earlier, more akin to Divinity Original Sin and less akin to XCOM. There were some juddering moments and some sound glitches that I tacked up to pre-release build bugs, but there wasn't that standard format of giving a unit an order, that unit pivots to face the enemy, statically stands there, shoots, then we see the enemy get hit, your unit does a victory action, then pivots back in place, before then doing another action. That is what every single XCOM clone looks like, right? It always looks so robotic, but not this time around. My last note here is on difficulty. I like that the game is a challenge from the start. It's not just you blowing through hood rats in the club. There's an actual danger to having your solo knight getting overwhelmed by cultists. And I'm not sure really what difficulty I was on, but this was a comfortable level of challenge and fun. I'd probably turn the difficulty up one more notch or two because I'm sadistic, but Chaos Gate had me hooked from tutorial to Exterminatus all throughout my hands down. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Have you seen a ton of content out there and are really liking what you see? Are you waiting to find out more about a specific mechanic? What do you not like about what you've seen? Let it be known below. And one thing too to note is that Aaron Dembski-Bowden, my favorite Black Library author, I believe is actually on the team writing the story for this. So I don't know much about the story, and the stuff that I have been able to share with you is very, very vague anyway. So once we find out more about the story, I'm sure that'll be a huge drawing point for me, because he's written many books for Warhammer 40,000, and he has a book about Daemonhunters. So this is definitely an arena of his that he is very familiar with, and I'm stoked to dive in more on that story. But be on the lookout for more Chaos Gate content in the weeks to come, and thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one, and take care.